Hello, my name is John Hernandez. I am the co-founder and programmer for the Latin American Film Festival of Dallas. You have just seen the film Yankee. We are here with the director, Yamel Thompson. How are you, Yamel?
Good. How are you, John?
Doing really well, thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today, but also just letting us show your film. Uh, when I first saw it, it struck me as a kind of movie that is the kind of movie that we want to show, especially regarding documentaries, because it's so much of the film is about kind of the relationship between the director and the subject. So it just made I thought it would make for a very fascinating conversation as well. The very first question I had, though, just watching the film, was wondering what made you want to go study film in Cuba. I mean, I imagine there's a ton of great film schools in Mexico, so I was just wondering what was the path to get you to Cuba?
I think in general, I think a lot of Latinos, not everyone, but me, I was one of them. We kind of like romanticize Cuba as a country, not saying it's politics, but like Cuba is a very mythical figure in Latin American history. So I was always curious about the country and the school itself. It felt like a myth to me because it was founded by as an international project, and it was founded by Elvirri, the Argentine
Oh,
documentarist,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a little after he won the Nobel Prize, and together they made this beautiful project with a plot of land that was given by the government that was in the middle of nowhere. um, and I remember that kind of like the motto of the school is so that the place of utopia that by definition exists nowhere exists somewhere. So just with that, it was like just so beautiful and like mythical. And it had so much like, I was very curious and very intrigued. Plus, the program itself is known to be really, really, really thorough and really interesting and like a lot of critical thinking, but also thinking outside the box. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's a school that's kind of like in the highway, in the middle of the fields, in the middle of nowhere, on the way to a little town called San Antonio de los Baños. So I also thought it would be a beautiful place to be in solitude, to be remote, to have absolutely no distractions. And it is indeed an incubator where like you wake up, you like inhale, exhale, and eat filmmaking with a bunch of like really incredible people and interesting people. And when you're not doing that, you're having very stimulating conversations with everyone around you, or you're just like contemplating what's around you. So it just felt like it was the kind of space where I needed to embed myself, or I was very curious to be a part of.
Now the film begins with you basically filming Jans, right? Because he just catches your eye. Is that something where, like, on the weekends you're just going to the city, like, with a camera and just filming everything, or what was the process to finding Jans? What was that like?
It's exactly what you said, because so there was so much calm and solitude in the school, and I am a very hyper person. I'm like I love high stimuli, and I so by the time it was Friday and I had been there from Monday through Friday, I was like, I need to go out. I need to like like let out some energy. So I would just go by myself. There was like a little Wawa that would take you to the city, to Havana, or you could just take a series of like different taxis until you got there. So every Friday, I would leave. Sometimes I would skip school. Sometimes I would just leave after classes, and I would just go with my camera and explore, like literally just film what was around me, and just walk with my camera, registering. And on one of those moments was when I was just like recording the sea, the ocean, and then there was this group of fishermen, and I turned and there was Jans. So it was like that kind of encounter on one of those Fridays where I was just like I had left school and I was filming. Was that the question?
Yeah, yeah. um, so you started filming him, like some of like there's not like permission or anything like that. You're just like, okay, I'm gonna film you. But I'm wondering what it was like for you to not just film him, but film the world around him. Was there ever like any conversations with like the people around you, like, okay, what are you doing filming this random kid? Uh, was there not just like from his side, but also like maybe like your own friend group, maybe like in the university as well?
Mm. So yeah, on his side, that's something that still to this day surprises me. The fact that there genuinely was not any questions or resistance, even not at all. Like on the side of Jankee and me, it was like our game. And even though he was both at the same time, in the beginning he was shy, he also enjoyed the attention and he liked being filmed and he liked seeing what I was filming. On the grandmother's side, the grandmother was so sweet and very inviting of the camera, almost like if it was like another guest, like me and the camera. She was always very happy, uh, never uncomfortable, to the point. I mean, it's not on the film, but there was like fights that would happen with the family, and like I would just leave the camera recording, and I was there, and they were never uncomfortable. The grandpa was also even like nostalgic about it a little bit because he was a cameraman back in the day when he was young in like national television. So he was always talking about like he loved film and he loved television. And the father, he was his opposition was not really the ethics of filmmaking or being inside the house with the camera. His was more about the politics of desire. He would be very upset at me if he ever saw me talking or recording other guys or other people, if I was interacting with other males in the blog. um, so no, in terms of the family, no, but that's interesting that you asked that question. If there was ever any questions, so on in the school with my friends, yes, like I would say more of a curiosity from Melissa, who becomes later on the editor of the film and one of the producers. She was very curious. Like she would always ask me like, what did you record this weekend? Can I see what you she was always very intrigued by the dynamic and the process.
Hmm.
um
Yeah, that was gonna be one of my questions. I was wondering, how did this like Argentine like film director and editor get involved in this project? I guess she was at the school as well.
yes, we were in class, we were in the same class, we were
Oh,
classmates, and she was doing an amazing project that also the project that she started as a research back then when we were together in school. It's a film that she just released last year. uh,
the is it the face of the jellyfish? Is that the one?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So she was doing all of her research. She was filming faces of animals. Me and her would go to the aquarium, like we would do, like she was doing her own research because she was just starting research to write her film. And at the same time, I honestly was, and Melissa is amazing and very methodical, and like she knows exactly what she's doing. And I am more like, I was just going with the flow, recording this guy that I felt such a pull towards. I didn't know that I was going to end up making a documentary about it. And and yeah, so with Melissa, she would always watch the footage and she knew in real time everything that would happen. And she always had all these questions about our dynamic and stuff. And she met him back in the day. So that's the beginning of the relationship. But the way she really got involved was way later on during the pandemic, when it's been like, a few years from recording,
Hmm.
that I was finally able to start looking at the images and revisiting all of the material. And I did a cut, like a very rough, like string out of like these moments, and I sent it to her. I was like, "Oh, I wonder what you think of this." I wanted to hear her opinion, so I sent it to her, and she told me, she's like, "This is very interesting. Like, send me more." And so I kept sending her more moments, and then she said, "Would you be open to sending me a drive? Like, I want to like play with it." And I was like, "Sure." So I sent her a drive, and then me and her started doing like morning calls, and we
Hmm.
would do these edit sessions together. Like she kind of like became the editor out of this like exchange and conversations, and it was very interesting because thanks to both Melissa and the time that had passed between when I recorded when I captured this footage and when me and Jans were together and the time that I started being able to watch the footage, I think it was very both the time and Melissa were very necessary for the film to be able to be what it became later on, you know?
Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about, I guess, the production timeline, because I was thinking, I was reading that this was around 2016 that you started filming. I was like, how long were you in Cuba actually filming this relationship?
So the very first time that I was there was for about like almost 7 months, like living there. And yeah, I was there for a few months, and that's when I met him, and that's when I kept recording with him. And then I kept going back many times up until 2018. Yeah, like it was a 2 year. It was from 2016 to 2018, or maybe it was 2019. Yeah, so I kept going back many, many different times, and the actual time that I spent with Jankee had been like a little less than a year. But then there was other visits, and then there was the last visit.
Is that what's in the film, that last visit?
Say what?
Is that what was in the film, that last visit?
Exactly. So the very last visit is what's on the film.
And when was that?
I think that was either like the late 2018, like 2 years after the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had like the initial like 7th-month period, and then you had like on and off, and then you had the final visit, and then you had the time kind of off the project, and then Melissa got involved during the pandemic. So does that sound right?
Exactly, yeah. 18, 19, 20. Sí, yes.
So I guess obviously this started like in 2016. We're now in 2026, but it premiered last year in 2025. Can you talk a little bit about that editing process, or I guess just not just the editing process, but the process of actually turning it into a finished film? Because you said it did require some distance from it. It also required, like having another set of eyes on it. But I was wondering kind of what the path was to finally get it out there.
Like in terms of,
well, like what were some of, besides just like, okay, she helped you put it together, but what were some of the challenges, I guess, of like the actual editing, or what were some of the questions you guys were asking yourselves?
in very practical terms, the main challenges that we had was finding the time,
Yeah.
and because we all had our lives and we were working. I mean, the pandemic, there was a little bit of window of time that everyone had for a tiny window of time. So that's when I started looking at the images, and we started playing around with it. But later on, life kind of like caught up to everyone in a regular rhythm of life and having to work and all of that. So finding the time was very difficult. And then the funding of it. So those two things in a very practical sense. But in a more internal sense, I think it's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like for a long time, like I didn't look at these images for a very long time. Say my last visit was in 2018. I didn't start looking at it until somewhere in 2020, started looking at it and started playing with it a little later after that, because I think I needed that separation. It was just very emotional and very close. And there was things that I didn't want to see about that time. There was things that I didn't want to see about the way that I was with Jans. There was things that I didn't want to see about the younger Yamel, like 23, 21-year-old Yamel. Like I didn't want to see those things. And then I think that time really helped me be able to see it as a different person, so that I could actually get into showing certain things that I wouldn't have shown otherwise if I was still very emotionally close to the piece. And I think one of the main questions that I was asking myself during the time and that we were making this was like the kind of like the politics of desire specifically, and intimacy. I was wondering, I always had this question of what is intimacy, and can you build intimacy? Can you create intimacy, or is it something that just happens. You know what I mean? Or can you put yourself in a situation where can you just choose a person and then decide to build that bond and link with that person, or is there another layer that has to exist for you two to be able to construct that, you know? And how one-sided is it? Or even the interaction of like when you have a relationship with someone, any kind of relationship, how political it can be in the sense of like the power dynamics. It was
Yeah,
also a
yeah.
question, what are these power dynamics? What is our role in this situation? Who has the power? Who doesn't? It was kind of like those kind of questions.
Yeah, in that sense, I think that final visit that kind of is shown in the film, where basically the power gets shifted from you as a director and holding the camera and to Jans as being, an active participant and saying, "We're not going to do the things that you want." And like, even though you are the one filming me, it's not going to work the same way that it worked before. That part, I think, is what I think is kind of essential to the movie. Although I would say that in the beginning, I think if you were like a professional documentarian, right, and you came and you started filming Jans, you wouldn't have the same relationship and bond that you did, because it was just you kind of stumbling into the relationship. And I think that's kind of what makes it fascinating, is because you were just kind of living your life and this happens. You stumble into this relationship that the dynamic is very unbalanced. It's very imbalanced between kind of what it would be if you're more like I guess like a proper documentary who was respecting all the ethics and rules and everything like that. But I think the film is really interesting because you kind of don't 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 play by those rules and basically just kind of barrel through in a relationship, and like the ethics, don't worry about that. And
Yeah.
they kind of explore the naughtiness of this relationship. I guess that's part of it why I find it so fascinating and why I want to show it. How does I mean, it's been a few years since you said that last visit. It's been a less than a year or so since the film premiered, but I was wondering how Jans feels about the film.
Yeah. The first time he watched it was in May of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And we met in this little cafe in Buenos Aires. And obviously, I couldn't help myself. I had a handy cam, so I recorded him watching the film. I asked him, I was like, "Are you okay if I record this?" And he's like, "Yes." And also, imagine we hadn't seen each other in so long, like, you know, so it was kind of crazy to just like re-encounter him. And then also, the first thing we do is like sit down next to each other and watch this face. And what he said was very raw and very beautiful. He said to me after the film finished, he said, "Wow, I can't believe you captured this." And he said, he was like, "I was very in love with you, but not because of you. Looking back, I was very in love in a way that I will never be able to be, because I had the freedom that came with like a young age and having no worries and having like absolutely like no real life concerns. So I have the space inside of me to be able to give myself fully to someone and really be there." And he said, and I don't think that's ever a time that's going to repeat for me in my life again. Like the time in my life where I was like just like very like light, so to speak. And he would be fishing and he would be with his friends. So I think for him, he sees it as like an encapsulated very specific time of his life where when he was very happy. He sees it more as that time of his life. And then he also said like, "Oh my God, you were such a," I don't know how to say it in English, but he was like, "Oh my God, you were like a como que like a heartbreaker." Like, oh, and he was laughing about it. He's like, "Oh my God, you were such a heartbreaker. I was such a," in the whatever. He just had fun with it. He loved it, and I think he loved it because of what he saw in him throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it's like, who has the time? Honestly, like I think about it too. It's like I wouldn't not right now have the time to be like, let me go out with my camera, see what I find, and then give myself to that for whatever amount of months. Like And same with him. He doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't have the time to just go in and fish and fish and fish and then return the fish to the ocean and then come back and hang out with his friends. Like, I think it captures that kind of like almost coming of age where he was like still like turning into like an adult, you know, and he had this freedom to himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film captures that, but also I think maybe it captures it both ways, right? The like when he captures him at that precise moment in time when he was that young, he was that open, he could let himself be that open in front of a camera and to another person. But also say you as a filmmaker, you probably, you're probably more to be that age, to be at that age at that exact moment when you were also open to jumping into this thing as well. It's kind of, I would say, like a dual portrait as well. Yamel, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I was wondering, I mean, you kind of said that you probably don't have the time anymore to kind of throw yourself into a project like this, but I was wondering if you had any ambitions to work on any other documentary projects.
I would love to, yes. And I actually do have the plan to do it. I just mean like I cannot do it in the way I did it there, where for literally months, that's all I did,
Mm-hmm.
nothing else. And I was just literally living like his life on the weekend, staying with him, just like whatever his timing and the pulse of his timing was mine.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I just moved to a neighborhood here in California that I find very interesting, and I have a lot of very amazing and interesting neighbors. And I want to do like a documentary about this neighborhood that I moved in 2 years ago. It feels like I just moved here, but it was 2 years ago. And I'm like, I've never done narrative, but I'm playing with the idea. I'm writing this script about this film about this woman who can only love through violence. So yeah, those are the things.
Hopefully those come to fruition at some point soon. Yamel, I want to thank you very much for your time. We're very happy that we're able to show your film, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you.